Can you say hi, Momo?
Hi, Mama.
Can you say hi, honey?
Hi, honey.
You want to make a video with me?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, great.
Great.
Great. I think this is the first, like, interactive Mariah video that we've had so far. Yeah. Oh. Thank you. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does a dinosaur say?
Roy.
I don't know how long this will last, but we wanted to make a favorite books of 2023 video. In the past, I usually kind of go by month and just like pick my favorites from each month and then kind of like combine any months that I didn't read very much and end up with like, 10 or 12. This year, we're just gonna do straight 10. And it was just the 10 that kind of stuck with me the most as I was looking back over the year. These were the ones that I just really loved and like was still thinking about. I have quite a few honorable mentions. There were a lot of other good ones.
Oh, we're reading.
Totally. And I covered actually every single book that I read this year. And where it was set in another video. So you can watch that one on my channel. That one's kind of cool. It's like maps in all of the books that I read this year. But I made a list. Let's just do a top 10. They're not really in any particular order. It's more like just when I read them. Number 1. Wow, okay. This one I read at the beginning of 2023. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. No, I don't have this one. I listened to this one on audio. I like using Libro FM and then it supports a local bookstore. So I forgot, I listened to this one and the reader was incredible. The accent was so good. It was just amazing. This one's by Barbara Kingsolver and I've read quite a few of her books before and they're always so good. And it was amazing to me how she was able to inhabit this character who is like a young man who lives in Virginia. And just the way that she inhabits him is so amazing. It is a Southern retelling of David Copperfield, so it's really tragic. Everything that happens to this kid is just awful. Like, his dad is dead. Peekaboo. He is taken from his mom because she uses drugs, and so he has like a foster family that he lives with. He really doesn't feel like he belongs anywhere though. And this is set in like the 90s in Virginia, if I didn't say that before. I'm a little bit distracted if you can't tell. Oh, you want your doll? Ah, pretty. And this kid is ultimately, a really flawed person, but you care so much about what happens to him and you're so heartbroken every time he is heartbroken, every time people let him down, and every time he has like the chance to do something good and it's always ripped away. And ultimately the book is about just the devastation of the opioid crisis in small southern towns and how these people are really preyed upon. And I also really liked the tension between like small towns versus cities and like where will you be taken care of. Like if there are more resources in the city, that can be helpful, but if your people aren't there, then sometimes it's not worth it to move away from your people. But if your people in your small town abandon you, then you like really have nothing. So it's very, very good. It's long. I recommend the audiobook.
Mama, make your water.
Okay. I don't know what order I put these in, but they're just like on my phone. Another one that is nonfiction that I absolutely loved is Jesus and John Wayne. This came out a while ago. I got it a couple years ago and like started it and then finally finally completed it this year. I had read like the first chapter or two, and then once I got into it, I just sped through it because it was so fascinating. It tracks like the church's obsession with like cowboys and masculinity, and John Wayne, of course, and Ronald Reagan, and just the way that those values became so entrenched into like American evangelical values, and how it's obviously not like biblical or Christ-like or anything like that, but it is just very, very cultural. But we've come to kind of accept it as like part of Christianity, when it's really just like, well, she does kind of get into, like, I would connect it to like Turner's Frontier thesis, and how like this idea of like conquering frontier is very appealing to white American males for one thing, and we really glamorize that and really obscure what frontier life actually was, and how it really wasn't even individualistic. It was done by companies hiring out people to go conquer lands, and the army went and, you know, murdered people who were already living there, and, you know, destroyed their resources. Yes. But that does have a lot of parallels to like the Promised Land in the Old Testament and stuff like that. So the book is very, very good. Highly recommend it. I'm going to talk more about it in another video, actually. I need to go back through and kind of highlight some things. Let me hold it up for you. This is what it looks like. I'm going to keep it handy. It's that long if you are interested in the length and like the feel of it, you know? They talk about this book on Twitter a lot. Like my whole Twitter feed is like reactions to Jesus and John Wayne. The next one that I loved, I love the cover, I love the colors, I love everything about this book. True Biz by Sarah Novick. This book is about a community of kids at a school for the deaf in Ohio, and also their principal, who is hearing, if I remember correctly. You see your friend out there?
Yeah.
There's so much deaf history in this book, and I really, really loved that. And it teaches you a lot of like ASL, and it gets into the history of ASL, as well as BSL, like Black Sign Language, and the reasons why those would have like developed separately during segregation. And it has multiple points of view. So like this, if you can see, is a little F for February. That's one of the characters. This one is an A for Austin. And so this was my favorite book about teenagers this year, but also I loved the sections with February, who is the principal, because she ends up teaching a class, like an American history class, through the lens of deaf history, and it was just really, really cool, and I love it so much, and it inspired me to take an ASL class over the summer. I took it through Language Priority, and it was awesome. It was on Zoom, and I would love to keep up with it. I need more time. Another of my favorite books of the year is this one, Age of Vice by Deepti Kapoor. This was not the longest book that I read this year, but it was a long one. Although I read this one pretty quickly because it's very bingeable. It begins with kind of like a murder mystery, so it's a little bit of a thriller, but it's definitely not as like fast-paced as a typical thriller. What are you doing? What are you stepping on? Destroying my biography of John Newton. Let's not do that. What was I saying? Okay, so it's a little bit more just like a contemporary fiction. Like we get away from the murder mystery plot quite a bit. I mean, it couldn't all be a murder mystery with this many pages, but it definitely gets into like wealth inequality in New Delhi, and then it's UP, which I forget what that stands for. Something Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and like workers from like Nepal in India. Okay, we're gonna go outside and scooter with the neighbors, and then I will be right back. All the chaos. Oh my goodness. Oh, the chaos. Okay, let's see if we can just get a few minutes in to talk about the rest of these. So what I really liked about this one is that it shows what life is like in like modern India. I don't know a whole lot about like, you know, just kind of like the nuances of like caste and money and status and just like how people get jobs and stuff like that in India today. So this one was really interesting to me. It's long, but I recommend it. We might as well go into the Covenant of Water next, just because it's also set in India, but very far away from New Delhi. It's in Madras, India, which is like southeast India, whereas this one is set like in the north. So that one takes place, it starts more like in the 30s, maybe even like the 20s, and it spans several generations and decades, and we end up in like the 70s or 80s. Okay.
Okay.
All right, you guys watching TV or what? So Covenant of Water starts with a girl, like a young girl who has to go marry this older man, and it's really traumatizing for her to leave her family and go live with him. His previous wife died, so he's a widow, and they already have a kid. Oh yeah, they do. They already have a son. So she becomes, she's like 12 or 13, and she becomes a mother and a wife like overnight. Even the husband, even the man is like uncomfortable with this situation. But it's just like how things were done, you know? So you kind of get a glimpse into that. And then we follow...
A dream.
A dream?
A dream.
Their son, and then eventually like he gets married and they have a daughter, and we also follow her life. So we get like 3 generations worth of stories and 3 generations worth of heartbreak. There's so many sad things that happen in this book, and it's also interesting to get just like the, you know, it's kind of historical fiction because you're seeing what's going on at the time. Like there's talk about Gandhi and about like becoming independent from the British and creating the state of Pakistan. This is pretty far away from that area, and also the people in this book, like the community in this book, are Christians. They're called St. Thomas Christians. So this is kind of a different community of people in India, and the author is a doctor, a medical doctor at Stanford. And so several of the characters, there's a guy from Scotland who comes to India to be a doctor. So he's Scottish, but he like, you know, lives in England, I think. And so he's kind of like discriminated against there and can't become a surgeon like he wants to. And so he moves to India, as that is, you know, like territory of England at the time. And so he has his whole storyline through it as well. Oh, wow, you found some glasses. You want to see what they look like? Look. Look, Momos. Cute. Cute. Mommy's turn? Okay. You made them really dirty. Can't hardly see through these. You can see a little bit better there. So in this book, there's a lot of talk about surgery and the body, and then that also kind of gets translated into art and sculpture, like in the same way. So it's really, really interesting. It's a very long book, but it's so worth the read. And again, I just like learned a lot about this community in India, which is very, very different from Age of Vice. I don't want to be wearing these. Let's do Beartown. And I guess this is kind of just like the series in general. This was recommended to me by everybody on the internet. I read a couple other Frederick Bachman books last year, and then people were like, you have to read Beartown. This is a series about a small town in Sweden, like in the forest, the Beartown Bears. They have a hockey team, and everybody loves like the boys that are on the hockey team, and they can kind of like do no wrong, but there is a sexual assault at a party, and it really impacts everyone. And so the way that he talks about what happens in the aftermath is done very well. Like, you do need a trigger warning for it, but I do appreciate the way that it was described and spoken about. Oh, hello. Oh, okay. Here's Mariah. You can talk to her again.
That's Tim.
And then we also see like just how this impacts more than just to people. It impacts their families and the team and the community and like who people believe and, you know, whether or not people think other aspects of like the community or the hockey team should be impacted by this when it wasn't everybody's fault, or were more people like complicit in creating this environment, you know? So there are other like plot lines besides that, but that's kind of what everything is centered around. I really like the parents' relationship, the parents of the girl, Mia, I think her name is, and the friends and their different families. And yeah, it's just really, really good. You know, different for me. I don't think I've read too much that is set like in Sweden. So it was interesting to read. And then also it's just like very nuanced and heartfelt and very moving. So I still need to read Winners. That is on my list. I'll probably read that very soon. I need to finish out the series now that I've read 1 and 2. Another one of my favorites was the Heaven and Earth grocery store. I bought this like the day that it came out. I had it pre-ordered. I was so excited because I love James McBride. I didn't really hear a lot about it before I read it, so it's kind of nice going in like not knowing what was going to happen. But it's set in the 30s in this town in Pennsylvania. I think it like was a mining town and things are kind of changing. There's a community of European Jews who have immigrated to this area to escape persecution in kind of like various European countries, Russia, Ukraine, Hungary. They're all coming together to kind of form a community of Jewish immigrants, but they also don't really trust each other because they're not the same like nationality. And then you have people who are from the South who are Black that are, you know, moving to the North in kind of the Great Migration. And they're all kind of from different places too. Also is trying to escape persecution, right? So this community of Black people and this community of Jewish people are both escaping persecution, going to Pennsylvania where they're not immune from persecution at all, but it's like better than it was. So they're just trying to make things work there, and they don't really trust each other. But there is this character named Chona who is a Jewish woman, and she is disabled by polio. Like, she has a limp in her leg from polio. So there's a lot of talk about disability in this book as well, and quite a few characters are impacted by polio. And she is kind of a link between the Jewish community and the Black community. So she's like white in a sense, like she's white to the Black people, but she's Jewish to other white people. And then she also has her disability, and so she doesn't really fit neatly into a category. None of the people really do. And then there's also this kid who was born without any disabilities, but there was an explosion like of a stove and it left him deaf and blind, and then his sight eventually came back, but he's still deaf. But he can kind of speak because it happened when he was like 12 years old, and he can lip read, and he's really smart and he can get by. Something happens with him and he ends up in like a mental institution, and so it also kind of gives us a glimpse into, you know, how disabled people or mentally ill people were treated at that time. And both communities like have a vested interest in like getting him out of there. So there's a ton of characters. Everyone kind of speaks in a non-committal way. The dialogue is not what like pushes the plot. So I was trying to explain this on Instagram a little while ago because some of the Goodreads reviews were like kind of low because they're like, it's so confusing, it's so hard to figure out what's going on. But that's because that's the way that people really speak. A lot of the time they don't actually like say what they're going to do. So like normally, like in a lower level book, the way that people talk when they ask each other questions, that kind of moves the plot forward and you figure things out. But in this book, people ask each other questions and they avoid answering, or they kind of change the subject, or they lie about what they're gonna do, or they lie about what happened. And so it's really hard to follow like what is going on, because everyone is a little bit like shifty in the way that they answer each other, but that's how people really do talk, especially when they don't trust each other. So it takes a lot of concentration to keep up, and then to also like guess what people really mean, because they don't always say what they mean. But I think it's a masterful book. I loved it. Definitely one of my top 10, probably like top 5 favorites of 2023. Babel is another one of my very favorites, like maybe my favorite of the year. This is another pretty long one. I actually listened to it on audio, which I highly recommend because the reader is very good, and there are lots of different languages in this book, and I don't know how he does like the accents and everything for all these different languages. And then there are like footnotes within it as well, and there's a different reader that does the footnotes. But yeah, it's amazing, but I wanted to have a physical copy of it as well, and maybe just like read it again. So the way that I would describe it is it's kind of like Harry Potter without J.K. Rowling, and with, you know, like you have this opportunity with a bunch of kids from different places. They're at Oxford, and you have this opportunity to talk about like what got them there and the different like levels of privilege that each of them have within this institution, where really like none of them have any power. So one kid is from China, and this professor like brings him to Oxford. Well, they're all kind of brought to Oxford except for the girl who is white, and her brother was supposed to go there, but something happens to him, so she gets his spot. And then there's a kid from India, and is it just the 3 of them? I think just like the 3 of them mostly. And so they're trying to navigate their space in Oxford, where they are translators. And so it's speculative fiction in that it's like kind of historical fiction, but the way that England like gets their power is from these gold bars that are activated with like different languages being translated. So that's why they're bringing in all these kids from like different places around the world who can speak different languages, and they're really smart. So they're being like exploited for their knowledge, and then that makes England more powerful. But then like the places where they're from and where those languages are from do not benefit from any of the gold bars. So this is a critique of empire and a critique of colonization and racism. And then you have this white girl who experiences her own struggles because she's female, but she also has a really, really hard time seeing how things are different for her 2 friends who are, you know, Chinese and Indian. Oh, and also the kid who is Chinese is half white, so sometimes he can like pass as white, but not always. So there are just so many like interesting explorations in this book, and it's kind of split into like 3 different mini books almost. The first one is very like Harry Potter-ish, and then the second one is when they're on this ship coming back from China, and then the third one is like the battle scenes. And so like if you have started it and like you got a little bit into a rut, like keep going with it. It's so good. I think it's like just one of my favorite books now. Another one of my new favorite books from this year is The Making of Biblical Womanhood by Beth Allison Barr. She's a historian. She has a PhD in history. She teaches history in Texas, I think at Baylor, I want to say. Graduate school at Baylor University. I tabbed a bunch of things and highlighted a bunch of things in this book. It's all of the like ancient culture and history and medieval culture and history around women in the church that you're never taught in Sunday school, but that really centers women and shows how involved women have been in Christianity, like global Christianity. Maybe Western Christianity is a more accurate way to say it. But it's just like so well done, so interesting. And I'm gonna put together another little video about kind of books about women in the church that I read this year, because they were all so good. And I definitely recommend this one, and then like following her on Twitter or X or whatever. And I don't know, that platform's about to go down in flames, I think. If it hasn't already, it's already smoking, but interesting conversations over there. Okay, and then I think we have made it to the last one. Conjure Women I thought was also really, really good. And I know I have it somewhere, but I can't find it. And my battery's about to die again. Oh my gosh, I have been out of YouTube practice and I'm doing so badly. But I talked more about this one in my all the books that I read in 2023 video, but it's historical fiction mixed with magical realism set both right before and right after the Civil War. And there's a doll like this one where it flips over and it's a different doll. In the book, one half of the doll is white and one half of the doll is black. And that's very symbolic of the rest of the story. And I'm just gonna leave it there because my battery's about to die. But thank you so much for watching and bearing with me in this very chaotic video. I love you guys. I will make a couple more book videos because I love doing that, and I will see you later. Bye.